Look at that. We're live. We have an intro video. We can thank both Cookies and Tribe for putting that together, because now I get to talk about the intro video instead of complaining that I don't have one. Anyway, my name is James McCool. I'm the owner of PaydiRtDFS.com, and this is going to be a little NHL Slate Talk. I'm going to be here with Pablo and Mike, community members and NHL ballers. We're going to be using the models over at Paydirt as well as Daily Faceoff DFO to break down the NHL slate. Doing a little bit early today. We don't usually do it around noon, but I kind of like the earlier ones. We were talking a little bit off screen about how it gives you a little bit more time to send your thoughts and kind of get things together. But all that said, how are you guys? Mike, how are you doing today with your Whalers jersey, bud?
Oh, I'm doing good. You know, it's time for hockey to come back. I missed it for 3 days. It was gone. But yeah, I'm excited. I haven't really looked at the slate yet. I don't think Pablo has that much either, but sometimes that's the best way, and we're getting a first look here. So I'm excited.
3 days can be a long time to wait for something. I can say that for sure. My child for sure could not barely wait fucking 3 days for Christmas, which was a blast, by the way. I need to put out a little video talking about that. But Pablo, how are you? How are you today?
I'm doing well. If I'm lagging, by the way, just let me know, because I did move and I now have good internet, but for whatever reason I was lagging earlier. So please let me know if I'm lagging. But I'm doing well. I'm happy to have NHL back and feel refreshed. And yeah, it should be fun.
RDJ, what's up, gentlemen? You know, just sitting here while Pablo lags his ass off. It's just your video that is lagging. Your audio is fine, so we'll get through. The people who are watching can see you be choppy, but it doesn't matter much. Yeah, we're gonna talk about NHL, but I also wanted to really quick show off a new tool that I'm building over at Paydirt, because I use these live streams as a way to just like do that, because you guys can fucking deal with it. So this tool is going to be a portfolio management app. And it's a little bit different than the stuff that I have been building over the last 2 years. Most things I've been building over the last 2 years over at Paydirt have been very focused around Paydirt specific models and projections, and this one is not. This one is an upload tool, so you'll be able to upload a portfolio of lineups and a projection source, and then do some things with your portfolio. It's not quite done yet, but I wanted to show off a little bit. So what you can do is you'll just go in and you'll say, here is my testing portfolio. Here is my, actually, let's do NBA from yesterday. So you come in and you say, here's my portfolio, and here's just lineups that I built. Here is my projection source. And then if there are names that are not matching, it'll give you options and say, hey, here's the best match, right? So Jaren Jackson and then Jabari Smith. So now all those taken care of. Then we go over here and we can kind of see like the entirety of what we're dealing with. So for this, I have not actually used this on my site yet, but what you'll end up seeing is things like this, where we're using classic, the contest size is 25,000, field strength. You can choose a whole bunch of different things here. It'll tell you specific things about your portfolio, and you can parse things down. It'll tell you the projected dupes for every lineup and the finishing percentile. And I think that that's the most important and cool thing here is when we think about playing lineups that have a chance to win, right? Like we talk about that all the time at Paydirt. This is a representation of where we should expect the lineup to finish in the GPP. So obviously what we want is top 1% finishes, right? So if you see a lineup that has an average expectation of finishing the 27th percentile, if you're a single entry player, you should not fucking play that lineup, right? Like you don't want to finish in the 27th percentile. You want to finish in the top 1 percentile. So if as an MME player, maybe you include that just for your distribution of lineups, and so that you can like cover some of your bases and deal with your distribution a little bit better. But this is a really cool feature that is really like, I think that this explains it in a way that is not really explained very well in the rest of the industry. And then you'll also be able to parse things down over here. This is the last thing I'm working on. I want to get it to where you can force players to be in lineups and remove them, and then do some if-thens, like if a lineup has Zach Levine, remove Bobby Portis, stuff like that. But this is going to be in beta testing here pretty soon. Wanted to show it off because I think that it's super cool. It's going to be really valuable for Showdown. It's going to be really valuable for MMA. It'll probably be kind of valuable for things like League of Legends and CSGO as well. Just really cool tool and kind of a difference in the way that I am building out tools. So wanted to show that out before these guys do their things. But yeah, there you go. Pablo, do you have your
cool
screen ready?
Yeah, ready to roll.
All right. Well, fucking put it up. What are we doing?
All right. Let's see. Share screen.
Oh, wrong screen. There we go.
All right.
Wait, really quick. Jump in the bets at Paydirt. Absolutely. I'll do a little promotional thing at the end of this, but if you have not gone over to the Odd Shopper Tails Marketplace to go join the Paydirt group, do that. With 10% ROI so far to start, thousands of dollars won in NBA. You should do that. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
So something I've started doing since you rolled this out a few weeks ago is I've started actually looking at the Sims on first pass to think about build structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so here you can see the results. I ran this for small field sharp, given that's what I play. It might be a little bit different for larger field. And you can see how often a certain stack size is winning a GPP. It looks like a 4-man today is looking pretty good. The average projection we can sort by 5-man looks great, but it's only winning about a lot less frequently than the 4-man and actually almost everything else. And then you can look at the average GPP projection. So what this is telling me is that we are looking to stack and correlate across probably a 4-man stack would be preferential. I know that Sheets and others, including myself, have done a lot of onslaught builds. I don't think it's unreasonable if you can find an onslaught you like a lot, given this projection and this average GPP projection. But just be aware that you're putting all of your eggs in one basket when you do that, which is usually the case when you do an onslaught build. James, do you have any thoughts on how you are interpreting the stack type statistics from the Sims?
Yeah, so the really important point here is, and this is what I said to a subscriber who was in the Discord, 4-man stacks win the most, right? But 5-man stacks have the highest upside. So what you should do is you should understand what that means for the kind of contests that you are entering. If you're entering a really large field, if you're entering a flagship, you want upside, right? Like you want as much correlation and upside as possible. So in that case, you should be playing the stacks that have the highest GPP projection and the highest overall average fantasy. In single entry and smaller contests, you likely want the kind of stack that wins the most. You're not as worried about full-on upside, right? Like those 3 points extra that you get in 5-man stacks don't matter in a 100-man contest. They matter in a 10,000-man contest. So that's the way that I look at it. And I also think that kind of speaks to like the average fantasy of 1-man stacks. I mean, it's only a count of one, but that being 133, like that would be an instance where if you're playing like a 10-man multiplier or something like that, like you don't even care if it's a full-on lottery lineup. It's shown that it does win once out of 1,000 sims or whatever. 3-man stacks has a lower average fantasy than 1-man's. Like you might go with that, but that's the way that I interpret it. The count there tells you kind of the floor of the stack, and the average GPP projection tells you the ceiling of the stack.
Cool. So yeah, I think that's instructive and useful. And to your point, we should be typically trying to build for the field size and the entry limits that you're playing towards. With that being said, let's dive into the slate. The way Mike and I have been doing this is starting by looking at the game team totals, looking at those teams in terms of the game environment, but also the market share percentages, and then going to the range of outcomes and the correlation on those teams to figure out what the priority pay ups, mid-range, and value lines are. So I'm going to start here with Vegas against San Jose. Vegas has the highest team total. It actually looks like a decent game pace, and they have a very strong HDSF plus, which combines high danger chances with shots for. Clearly a very good matchup, good game pace, good team total. So checking a lot of boxes there in terms of the macro environment. When we now go to the market share percentage and we look at Vegas themselves, and maybe it looks like some of the one of these lines here is not populating all the way, so maybe things are moving around a little bit for Vegas 3. I'm going to pull up Daily Faceoff as well. But the point here is that if we look at the last 14 games, it's predominantly going in terms of high danger chances strongly to Vegas 2. And shots is a little bit more split up between Vegas 1 and Vegas 2. And then in terms of goals, Vegas 2 again looks very strong. That's an interesting finding, given what will probably be, I'm guessing, based off these names and pricing that doesn't look exorbitant for a 19.2 line 1, a much chalkier, I'm guessing, Vegas line 1 than a Vegas line 2. But this tells you that at least in terms of the opportunities, Vegas 2 has been getting plenty of opportunities, even more so than Vegas 1 over the last 14 and even over a greater sample. Let's take a look at correlation on Vegas. And what we can see here is Vegas 1 is very nicely correlated. It's easy to think about building a 4-man where you have Olofsson, who's still really, really cheap, alongside Stone and Eichel. And you can even throw Shea Theodore in there for a power play 1 line, or Tomas Hertl if you want to play the power play line as an onslaught, or subbing in for Theodore with Hertl as well. Line 2, we just talked about, is getting a lot of opportunity, will probably be a lot less owned. You get Kolesar, who's really cheap at 2,500, basically a punt, alongside Carlson and Hertl. Obviously not quite as correlated. And now if we go to range of outcomes and we sort and to look at Vegas here, we can see that there might be something going on with the sheets here, because Vegas 2, their 2x, 3x, and 4x is looking like zeros. So I think there's probably some sort of a data error there.
I'll do a rerun right now for the question.
Sure. But either way, the median and the ceiling, just descriptively looking at them, we'll wait for the rerun. Neither one of them looks like outrageous value. I guess what I would say is that I like Vegas 1's correlation. I think in small field, I'd be probably more tempted to go Vegas 1 because of that correlation. And but I think it's worth noting the recent opportunities that Vegas 2 has had, and considering either working Hertl in as part of your Vegas 1, or even considering like a 2-man with him and Kolesar if you need a cheap 2,500 man guy. But Mike, what are your thoughts on Vegas 1 versus Vegas 2?
Yeah, I mean, Vegas is in probably the best spot of the night, all things considered. We don't have Matthews, we don't have Kaprizov. So I mean, Eichel looks really tasty at 8,600, top of the board. Your number 1 center there. Vegas 2 looks nice too, but you've got Carlson and Hertl. They're both centers, so that's kind of annoying. You've got to build the double center build, which, I mean, if I like to do it with New Jersey, I like to do it with some teams with better, main scorers at center, but I don't love to do that here with Vegas. And Carlson at 5,200, that's a lot to pay for him. He's been down in the low 4s, frequently before. But they're playing San Jose, so you got to think of all that too. So, I mean, you can really easily do your number 1 stack as Vegas 1 and feel really good about it tonight. Stone and Eichel can be together and have 3-point games, and that could probably happen. Theodore's been performing more on the power play, shooting more. So on the power play, it's really Eichel, Olofsson, and Theodore are the 3 shooters on the power play, and you can get them all in a 4 stack. That's a really nice start if you want to start with a 4-man Vegas. So I like Vegas a lot. Wallman's out for San Jose, like I said. So yeah, Vegas looks really good tonight.
Yep. So, and I think it's worth noting that they'll probably be fairly heavy chalk. And so just be aware of that reality when you're building with them, so that you have some leverage in your second stack if you're using them as a 4-man, especially Vegas 1. I think Vegas 2 will be significantly less owned than Vegas 1. And one way to get interesting is just to throw Hurdle in there alongside Vegas 1, just as a guy who's correlated via power play and who's been very active. I think on line 2, he's kind of my main interest. Like you said, Carlson, for his price, I don't know that I love, and Kolesar is more of a punt. So Hurdle to me seems like the priority if you're playing Vegas 2. Moving on to the next team total, we have Buffalo against Chicago. Looks like a pace down spot. It is actually the slowest paced game on the slate. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad spot. Chicago is not a good team, and Buffalo has a high team total. But it's worth noting that the game environment, with a bit of a slog combined with a pretty low high danger SF plus, means that the game environment itself doesn't look as wonderful. So I think it's worth considering that when you're combining that with projections and correlation. If we look at Buffalo in terms of their breakdown in terms of market share, they look pretty spread out. One, over the course of the season, has been a little more active, but 2 in the last 14 games has been a little bit more than 1. So it's really you're talking about line 1 versus line 2 here. Similar to Vegas in terms of price, we just saw it like around 19 and 12 to 13K. So pricing is similar between the two teams. If we now go to correlation for Buffalo, you can see that Buffalo 1. You've got Zucker for 4,300, which is pretty cheap, along Tage Thompson, and then Rasmus Dahlin is back. He was hurt for a little bit, but he's back. A lot of guys are probably going to be coming back off of some rest over this recent holiday break. And then line 2 is kind of a tasty, cheap line. 4,800 Peterka, 2,800 Jack Quinn. I think you could do a lot worse than that. You could do that or pair it with Rasmus Dahlin and play it as a 3-man. But Zucker is also cheap. So it's interesting that how while I don't love the game environment and Buffalo, we've often said don't play bad teams on big slates, and I do consider Buffalo to be a pretty bad team. I will say that their pricing makes them at least interesting. If we go to range of outcomes and look at Buffalo, let me sort here by alphabetically. Their line 2 actually is a pretty good 2x of 48%. Line 1 doesn't look quite as good. It looks actually pretty bad. So sheets at least think that we should be prioritizing line 2. Mike, what are your thoughts on Buffalo 1, Buffalo 2, or any other players in that game?
Yeah, I mean, the sheets don't love this game, actually. The Sims at least. But yeah, Buffalo 2 is a really good value. I think that's where I'm probably going. If I'm going here, I mean, you could probably fit Buffalo 2 with Vegas 1 pretty easily if you think about it. And that might be a chalk build because both Buffalo and Chicago, they don't play 1-0 games. I mean, if you look at the game logs, Buffalo seems to let 7 in, or they're going to score 7. So I'm interested. I just don't know exactly how I want to attack it yet. But I mean, Dahlin's pretty pricey, right? How pricey is he? Let's see.
He's like 71.
73, actually. Yeah. So he's not priced down for how little he's been back. It's not like we get that discount. Some players, when they come back from injury, they're lower and they get back up there. They immediately priced him high. But I mean, he's one of the best defensemen in the league when he's healthy. So I don't know. I'm still thinking this game is interesting because it could just be a back and forth like goal fest. And if so, I'd want a piece of it. I might do a lineup or a game stack this game, to be honest, because I mean, you've got some interesting players in the Chicago side too, and Bedard 6,900. So you could game stack this one, but I'm still kind of chewing it over. Not sure exactly what I want to do yet.
I just finished a rerun of the models.
Great.
I'm not sure if they will be live quite yet. Maybe got to give them 2 minutes or so.
Yeah.
But yeah, Oh, yep, there's less.
Hey, James, let me ask you a question on range of outcomes and game pace, game environment.
Yeah.
We just sort of talked about how Buffalo, Chicago looks like a bit of a slog, a pace down spot for both teams. Usually those things combined with a low HDSF plus for a given team, don't make us thrilled about the game environment. It'd be like an NFL total having a total of 36 and but there being players who are really cheap. Does the game environment right now feed into your range of outcomes? Is that priced in to the outcomes, or is the game environment still something we should be weighing outside of the range of outcomes?
It's priced in, but it's not priced in as much as you would think. There's a part of the range of outcomes that is priced in from the top down, as it regards to player baselines, but not macro environment. I guess I'll say that. So we're not using the game totals to distribute amongst the team. We're using it to say, here's what a player's baselines would be individually of the team. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's so my takeaway from that is that it's still okay for us to weigh that in and not feel like we're double counting it. Whereas if it was heavily weighted, you would be saying to yourself, well, don't double count.
Right. So what I'm saying is when it comes to one-offs, I would not utilize it. When it comes to stacking, I would. Just from a very layman's point of view, because when we build out the projections for NHL, people who use the Paydirt models for MLB know that I build bottoms up, right? So every single thing that I do for baseball is built from the ground up. I don't use I don't use Vegas totals whatsoever for baseball, right? So if you wanted to use Vegas totals for baseball, that's a completely separate thing. The models do not care about it at all. You can and should use it to inform your decisions. If both the models and Vegas like a team to score a bunch of runs, that's a great team to stack. When it comes to the NHL models, it's not completely bottoms up. The player level on an individual basis is built using top down. And then from a team basis, when I'm counting the lines and the power play stuff, that stuff is inclusive of Vegas lines. So it's not quite as valuable, right? Or I said that backwards. Sorry. Player levels are inclusive of Vegas lines. Line combos and power plays are not. So it's not something where it is as used from the models, but you still you wouldn't when you go to the player range of outcomes and you sort by 4x. Tommy Novak and Nick I have no idea how to pronounce this person's name. I can't do fucking hockey names. But when you sort by 4x here, the top two players who show up there, those guys are
Bukestad.
Yeah, that guy.
Bukestad, James, come on, say it with us.
Guys, if there are two consonants next to each other, I can't do it. Not my thing. But those guys, those are already inclusive of the Vegas lines. You're not getting anything extra from looking at game environments for those guys. But when you're looking at line combo range of outcomes, that is something where I think game environments can be utilized outside.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. So, yeah, and then to circle back on Buffalo, I mean, one interesting thing, and I've told this to people before, I always focus on 2x, 3x, 4x, but the cheaper a line is, the more I'm focused on relative value, because you do want median and ceiling from your value, but what you're really looking for is for them to pay off on a point per dollar basis so that you have money to spend up on your pay-ups. And and that's true for every sport, and it's true for our pay downs at SP2 in baseball also. That's why I say, okay, the SP2 is a $6,300 cheap guy. Yeah, you want some upside, but really you're getting him because you hope that he'll 2x, 3x, and then you can pay up for the guys you really want to sort of nuke. What's interesting about Buffalo 2 here is that if we sort by median and we kind of keep an eye on the price here, and then also at the 2x, they are the only team that has a 2x that is kind of in this range. It's a 48% 2x. There's a few others, but those others are more expensive, or they don't have the 2x. So like you have Chicago 1 that's 14-1 more expensive, and then we have San Jose 1 17-2 that's a pay up, and then we have New Jersey 2 that's a pay up, and then you have Nashville 1 that's a pay up. So what this is telling me is of the value lines that are not punts but sort of mid-range value, Buffalo 2 looks really strong. And when we look at the player level and we go back to Buffalo here and we sort, let's just go to Buffalo. It's going to probably show us. I haven't looked at this yet, but I'm guessing it's because Jack Quinn and Paterka are both pretty cheap. And sure enough, Jack Quinn's 2x is, astronomical, as is his 3x. So anyway, that's just like a note on how I often will look at value. And you can see here that Quinn's 2x is, top, whatever. It's like top 10. He's the number 4 value. So anyway, long story short, I think Buffalo 2 is an interesting value play. Mike, to your point, paying attention to ownership, I wouldn't be unsurprised if Buffalo 2 ends up really chalky. So we do need to be cognizant. If you're paying up for Vegas 1 and pairing it with Buffalo 2, you may be running into a very chalky team. So just be careful about that. If we keep moving here, we'll go to Dallas now. Decent total, same as Buffalo's. Game environment looks really nice. It's the highest paced spot on the slate. They have a really nice HDSF, so they should get a lot of high danger chances and shots if the recent past continues. If we look at Dallas themselves and look at how they're distributed here, we have in the last 14 games a pretty even distribution between 1, 2, and 3. That's actually one of the things that makes Dallas sort of hard to play, and that's also reflected in their projected goals, and that you have 1 and 2 with a decent projected goals. Both, if you round those, they both round to 1. Over the course of a larger sample, you can also see here 1, 2, and 3 have all been pretty darn close with each other. This isn't like one where you see 40% across the board for one line. So you have some decisions to make, and that's frequently been the case with Dallas, where you're kind of trying to figure out, are you playing 1, 2, or 3? If we go to correlation, and then we'll look at projections themselves as well. One, you have Rupe Hintz and Robertson alongside Heiskanen on power play 1. This is a lot cheaper than Hintz and Robertson have been in the past. Like in the past, these guys have been mid to upper 6s and even 7. And Robertson's been up in like the 7 to 8 range when he's really been hot in prior years. So these guys have been priced down because they haven't really had explosive performances in the recent past. Interestingly, now you have Wyatt Johnson and Jamie Benn. They haven't been paired together for that long. Jamie Benn's still really cheap at 3,900, and they're both on the first power play as well. And then you have line 2 with Duchesne and Marchment, and now they have Dadonov on there because I guess Sagan is out. It looks like usually it's Sagan, Duchesne, Marchment, but I guess Dadonov now for 3Ks with them. So Dallas is interesting because it's a nice game environment. If I had to venture a guess, they'll probably be significantly less owned than Vegas and probably even than Buffalo because it doesn't jump out quite as much in terms of matchup. And the other thing that will scare folks off of Dallas a little bit is just that, it's a bit of it's a difficult decision to make in terms of which line you're playing. Let's look at range of outcomes, and then Mike, I'm curious to get your thoughts on, how do you feel about these Dallas lines? How do you choose when you have 3 different lines that all look viable and have similar projections? And sure enough, the sheets are kind of saying the same thing here. If you look at the 2X, they're all around that 35-40% range. They all have a fairly close median ceiling relative to their price. So it's a tough one with Dallas 1, 2, and 3. I don't know that I have a great way of deciding. I'd be lying if I told you that I don't kind of like Ben Wyatt Johnson. I think Ben is always active. They're both on first power play. Wyatt Johnson is a really good player, and you can even throw Dodonov in there. Although, you know what? That's interesting. I think I had just said Dodonov was on with Duchesne and Marchment, so that might be something to keep an eye on in terms of lines. But what are your thoughts, Mike, on Dallas and how you would approach them?
Yeah, they're a tough one because they've got 3 lines in play, right? Like you were saying. Line 2, which was Duchesne, Marchment, and Seguin, was one of the best lines in hockey for the first 20 games of the season or whatever. Seguin's injured, so now they're trying to figure out the third guy in that line. I think it was Dodonov for a while. Now it's Blackwell. They're just trying to figure out their balance of their 3 lines because they had it when Seguin was there. They had their line that was doing everything. Last year, if you were to play the Stars, you would play Hintz, Robertson, and I think Wyatt Johnson was up there, or even Dodonov was up there, and they were just nuking every slate, or not every slate, but they were doing really well. They're not doing that this year, but they're talented players. They're going to find it, and they're way underpriced for their ceiling. I think I like the power play 2 with Harley on it. He's back. He's healthy again. Dallas power plays aren't necessarily like one power plays out for a minute 30 and the other power play might get out there for 30 seconds. They're more balanced than that. So it's like a 1A, 1B type of situation. Definitely the Hintz Robertson power plays is favored and probably the first off the boards, but the second power play's got, Duchesne, Marchment, Stankoven, Dodonov, and Harley. I don't mind if I'm going to play Duchesne and Marchment. I'm not playing Blackwell. I'll put Harley on there and then 3-manning it that way with a D. I probably will go that route. But yeah, that's how I'm thinking about it. And Mason Marchment, his dad, Brian Marchment, was a Whaler. So I mean, if I'm ever going to break a tie, I'm going to go to the Whaler lineage. So that's what I'm thinking, at least right now.
Yeah, so I think Dallas is an interesting play. I mean, I would venture to say that they'll be really low owned. I think that they don't jump out as kind of an obvious good spot like Buffalo or Vegas are. And again, given the decisions you need to make around which line you're playing, it's going to be difficult for people to decide. So one of the benefits of that uncertainty is that it'll drive down their ownership. So I think it's an interesting leverage play. Sheets certainly think they're decent value across the board. Nothing really jumps out to me in terms of individual players. I kind of think you can sort of decide how you feel about it and at least take some solace in knowing you're going to get them really low owned.
Yeah, Dallas is one of those teams that you can play players from multiple lines and not feel like you're not getting the correlation you want. So they're one of like the Devils are like that. Dallas is like that. Toronto without Matthews might be like that now, and maybe like Utah or something. So you've got certain teams that you can mix and match because their correlation isn't perfect, and it's still okay because their potential and their prices make it worth it. So,
yep. The next team we have here is your I know the team you take a lot of enjoyment out of following closely, which is Boston. Kind of a weird team this year. Just macroscopically, it feels like they're on the cusp of a rebuild, but they're hanging on. I don't know. It's not clear to me what they're doing. Anyhow, the game pace looks decent. The HDSF looks good. So macro-wise, not a bad situation for them against a Columbus team whose defense has been great. Columbus has gotten into a lot of shootouts this year, it feels like. There's been a lot of games that have been higher total with them. I feel like every other slate I'm seeing like a 5-4, 6-5 game that involves Columbus. That being said, I feel like Boston never has those games. I mean, I don't know how often we've seen Boston scoring more than 3 or 4 goals this year. So, that may be a little bias on my part, but let's take a look at the way Boston is distributed. It looks like Boston, too, in the recent past has really been dominating the high danger chances and the shots. I kind of like it when I see these things because it helps me prioritize who I'm going to focus on. That's also been true, but not quite as true over the longer sample. But Marchand, Lindholm, and Coyle, at least in the recent past, have been very involved for them. If we look at their correlation, we can see here that Boston 1 has Zacha and Pasta. correlated with McAvoy in the first power play, and then you've got Geeky, who's on the second power play, and then the second line you have Marchand and Lindholm, who are kind of more mid-range price at 6,100 and 4,600. So Boston has a nice total. Boston 2 looks like they've been getting the majority of the action as of the recent past. If we look at the range of outcomes for Boston, they actually project a little bit better with Boston 1 than Boston 2. Neither has like an enormously impressive 2x. And if we just look at median, their Boston 1 is the fourth highest, admittedly with decent value given their 16.7 compared to these other teams above them who are more expensive for the same median or a little higher median. So I don't know. It's been hard for me to play Boston this year, but Mike, you tell me. You're the guy who you follow them a lot closer than I do.
Yeah, I mean, Pastrnak, I believe. I mean, he's skating. He's taking morning skate, or he took morning skate. So I think he's in. He had left the game before the break there with an injury. He's still got the tag on DraftKings, so he might get a little less owned because people don't want to wait for news officially on that. But it might be coming out soon. We're still a little bit early. But yeah, Boston's in a really good spot. Columbus, they'll push pace. And the Bruins have, like line 2 with Marchand, looks really good tonight. McAvoy's way underpriced. He's 4,700. He's a great value D-man that's going to quarterback the number 1 power play for 4,700 against Columbus. That's way low. So you can go that route. It's just tough because, I mean, you can put Pastrnak with line 2 and then kind of go that way. Charlie Coyle is up on line 2 now, and he's they're trying to get him going. The Bruins are the best when he's a line 3 center, but those games aren't as exciting. When they're scoring more, he's getting involved on one of the top 2 lines, and that's where he is now, and he's still 2,800. So that is a punt play, and it makes Boston 2 super cheap to 3-man there, or to full stack with Lindholm, he has just not been good this year. But I mean, for 4,600, and then you can put full Boston 2 with Pastrnak, and you can put McAvoy. You've got your 5 stack that James wants you to play. It's something I might do even as a Bruins homer. I don't like to play the Bruins because I don't want to get pissed off twice. But I think I might do it tonight because it's Columbus. But on the other side, Columbus has some interesting plays that you could play too, because the Bruins are just leaking goals against this year. But it's not Swayman in net. It's Korpisalo, but that doesn't really change too much. So yeah, all that to say, Bruins line 2, put Pastrnak on there, put McAvoy on there, and you've got a 5-man Bruins stack that you can gather all the goals from the Bruins out of pretty easily. So
really, really quick.
Ahead,
She just ask a question here. I remember when we spoke, I cared less about including defensemen in stack analysis. I'm seeing Harley is a great individual value for Dallas. How does he fit into the stacks? So for me personally, the reason why we don't include, or why I don't include defensemen in stacks, is mostly in regards to line combos. But when you're going to overstack, you start moving into power play combos. So that's where he starts to fit in. Right. As a value, what he does is he kind of unlocks the ability to get a whole lot of those guys together. But it's not necessarily as a line combo add-on, it's as a power play add-on. If he's not involved in the power plays, I'm kind of less inclined to get there. But if he's showing up in the sims, then I probably would consider him more as a, like, he could be included, but you're not thinking about it in terms of the line combo correlations or anything. You're just saying he's a good value that plays on a team that is expected to do very well in GBPs tonight. So I would look at him more as a one-off, or kind of like a non-correlative stacking piece, if that makes any sense. Pablo, I don't know if you have thoughts on situations like that.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to correlate my D-men through power play because that's where they're going to get the majority of their opportunities to score and participate in events that generate fantasy points. This is more contextual, and I don't know how actionable it is, but I do think there are certain D-men and was kind of what I was alluding to in my own Discord channel yesterday about correlative properties between players. But Mike may have more. He's more of a hockey watcher even than I am. But I do feel like there are certain D-men who are more involved in a team's scoring than other D-men. Like there's D-men who are more shot blockers and take some shots, and then there's D-men who actually participate in goals. That's hard to define without contextual knowledge of actually watching the games. I think the easiest way to think about it is just to think about it, are they on the power play or not? Because those are going to be the highest value minutes. But you also have to keep in mind that a team may only have a couple power plays. So you're talking about, a total of like 3 to 4 minutes of that time together. So I tend to weigh it more on the power play, but there are certain D-men who I feel like are more involved in scoring than other D-men. And I wish I had a better way of defining that besides just kind of knowing who those guys are. But I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I think you're saying it pretty much right. Like if your D-man is got power play exposure, I would be more likely to stack them with one of the lines that he's on for the power play, right? So like for tonight, Harley, he's going to be power play 2. If he scores a goal and gets an assist, he's more likely to bring somebody along with him than a player like Brett Pesce on the Devils, who's 2,900. So I guess you could think of it as like if they're less than 3,500, at least in my brain, like there's less of a need, I think, to stack that your second D-man with a line. You're more in the punt range. So you want to play Connor Clifton for min price on the Buffalo Sabres. I don't think you need to figure out who to stack him with, right? You play him, hope he gets the blocks bonus and 3 shots, right? But like you're saying, Pablo, if there's scoring upside, there's points to be accumulated with those scoring opportunities. And that's where you start deciding, am I going to stack him? So for Harley specifically, I mean, he's not the worst one-off. He's $3,800. But you can also argue that he gets.
Why not just play McAvoy for? Yeah, he's not expensive. He's not a pay up like Miro Heiskanen. Yeah. And he's 4,700 and on the first power play with Pasta or
yeah. But I wouldn't one off McAvoy, right? Because like if he's he's probably part of a Bruins scoring 5 goals tonight. He gets in on 3 of them. There's other players that aren't like astronomically priced that are going to be getting 3-point games as well. So, I wouldn't one off McAvoy tonight, but you could. I mean, it's not the worst thing, but I wouldn't do it.
All right. If we move now off of Boston to Toronto, our favorite team to hate, they have a decent team total. Game pace is probably the second slowest behind Buffalo, Chicago, and their HDSF is not excellent. I don't know what the hell has been going on with Austin Matthews. Mike, what's been going on with Austin Matthews? Because I've seen all sorts of tweets about, Toronto and Austin Matthews have reached a agreement on how they're approaching his injury. Like, what's happening with him? What's the background on Matthews right now?
I'm not exactly sure. I know he's injured, and there's a nagging injury going on with him.
Okay.
Toronto is, famous for playing well in the regular season and then sucking in the playoffs. So there could be a little bit of load management going on here with him. I'm not entirely sure. They're playing Detroit.
Well, he's out either way, right? So
yeah, he's out. He's out. But I don't think long term it's going to be a big issue. But yeah, he's out tonight, and he's one less thing you have to worry about. So I'm down for that. It makes Toronto easier to kind of figure out.
Yeah. So if we look at their market share breakdown here, it looks like you're mostly deciding between line 1 and line 2 in terms of goals. Similarly, in the recent past, they've had very similar opportunities, as well as over a greater sample. Although, I think Nylander is a guy that always has kind of upside that the rest of those guys don't, aside from Matthews. I'm not sure anything else really sticks out on line 1 versus line 2 there. If we look at their let's look at their correlation first, and then we'll go to the range of outcomes. So it looks like you've got Marner, Tavares, almost the same price. And they've got Morgan Riley for $5K on the first power play. And then you've got Nylander, Nyes for 8,300, 4,700. Worth noting again, Nylander has kind of the upside that not that many other players have on this slate, like including Pasta or Eichel. So it looks like you're deciding between those two lines if you're playing Toronto. And then if we go to the range of outcomes here and take a look at Toronto, the sheets think neither Toronto 1 nor Toronto 2 look great. Toronto 3 actually looks like decent value for what it's worth. I don't know if there's a whole lot else to say about Toronto. It's interesting, without Matthew. I mean, sometimes in hockey, just like in other sports, especially NBA, you get like a nice opportunity bump because of injury. So having Matthews out, there may be an opportunity bump for someone like Pacioretty. I've played Pacioretty in spells this year. He's had his kind of ceiling games when things go right for him. But I can't say the sheets love one. I mean, their 2x is pretty terrible. Let's just take a look at their player range of outcomes and then get your thoughts on Toronto. But if we look at their individual player range of outcomes, Max Domi looks like very strong value. Nicholas Robertson too. That's why that line 3 is popping. And then other than that, I guess McMahon looks okay, but the pay-ups don't look that great. I mean, Nylander looks okay, but if we sort by median, just to like say, okay, am I paying up for Nylander again versus like McKinnon, Pasternak? Those guys have a slightly higher median. McKinnon is obviously the one whose ceiling and median stick out here pretty significantly. But I will say, you've got Nylander up there, and he's not. I mean, he's basically got nearly the same score as Pasternak, and he's got a better median sheets think than Eichel. So, Toronto with Nylander could be a contrarian pay-up spot because I highly doubt they'll be very owned against Detroit, and you do kind of get Nylander with that ceiling at probably lower ownership than you're going to get McKinnon or Pasta or Eichel.
Yeah. Toronto's been interesting this year. They're playing better defensively. They haven't had as many, blow up offensive games as you would expect from the Maple Leafs during the regular season. Like there were some games last year, especially where they would just nuke the slate. If you didn't have Toronto 1, you could turn off your computer early. Hasn't really happened a lot this year. But they're playing better defensively. So I'm really kind of out on Detroit on the other side of this game, most likely. Marner typically shoots more when Matthews is out, right? Because when Matthews isn't creating the offense and being the finisher, Marner picks up some of that slack. So I have a little interest in Marner. It's tough because Tavares is like the same price as him, basically. And then it's like now you're getting into a pretty expensive line, not in the greatest of spots and without their best scorer creating the offense. So I don't love it, but Marner and Pacioretty is like a 2-man and just leaving off Tavares. I'm thinking about maybe going there in a build, but overall, Nylander's always great, right? He's going to be the trigger man of the power play. He can definitely get there if you want to power play stack the Maple Leafs, but I don't really want to power play stack the Maple Leafs. But you have to remember, like you say, it's Detroit and it might be low owned, but Detroit sucks. So, I mean, Toronto could very well do well tonight. But yeah, they're tough with Matthews out. It makes it, you think it make it easier, but it actually kind of makes it tougher because you can't justify it as easy to play them.
I wish Nyes did stuff because Nyes at his price with Nylander and Riley, and you've got a nice 3-man on the first power play. The problem with Nyes is that like he's frequently like a nothing.
4,700 is a lot for him too,
and that's a lot for nothing. Like for nothing, you want to get like somebody in the mid 3s at least, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If not a punt. So I guess I'd be inclined to play like a Nylander, Riley 2-man maybe, or maybe think about doing a contrarian Tavares Marner. But Toronto's a little difficult. I kind of want to like them because I think they're not going to be very owned, but and if I'm going to play them, I sort of want Nylander's ceiling, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to justify it when I have other like pay ups in really good spots that are more easily correlated with their lines mates. I think that's kind of the issue for me, is that like the lines mates that you have for Marchand or for Eichel in just as good a spot, makes me sort of I'm not sure I can get to Nylander for those reasons. It's kind of like not his fault. It's the fault of his lines mates, and I can't play a bunch of guys around him like I can with Eichel or I can with Boston that we've looked at so far.
Yeah, I mean, if somehow you have 8,300 at the end of building 2 stacks, and you want to one-off Nylander, go ahead.
Right.
You can do that.
Right.
It's not the end of the world, but it's not how I usually build, and it's not.
Yeah.
It could work, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
So let's we got to be careful here with the Hatter. I've learned my lesson, so I'm gonna choose my words very wisely, so that we don't risk being banned from the Discord. But we've got Colorado against Utah. Obviously, Colorado's a wagon. I mean, they're we joke about it with the flow chart, but they really are in play every single slate because they have so many guys who can just go crazy, and they're they kind of remind me of like the Vikings way back in the day when they had Randy Moss. It's like they kind of like, even if they're not playing well, they still do stuff for fantasy purposes that can win you any given slate. So they're pretty much always in play. They have a not quite as impressive as a team total as the ones we've talked about, but decent. Game pace is kind of middle of the pack, so nothing to write home about, but not anything that should scare you a whole lot. And then their HDSF, is actually on the lower side. I think mostly because of a combination of their recent high danger chances haven't been that great, but also I think Utah has a lower end opponent high danger chances against, and a lower opponent shots for. Shots against. So not like the easiest matchup for Colorado, but I don't know that we care that much because they are Colorado. If we look at the way they're broken down in terms of their shots and their high danger chances, we've got Colorado 1 and 2, and this is kind of what I was talking about before. Like you can see Colorado 1 like pretty significantly dominates their shots and high danger chances in the recent past. Over the greater sample, it's actually a mix of Colorado 1 and Colorado 2. They have had some mixing and matching because they got Nichushkin back, and Mikko was up on line 1 for a while. So I think it's worth noting that they're kind of like recently got healthy, and that maybe should. I don't know that I would overweigh these numbers. I think at least you should say to yourself at line 1 and line 2 are both in play. And you can see that both lines have a decent projected goal. If we go to correlation for Colorado, they have McKinnon and Nichushkin alongside Makar, Rantanen, and Colton on the power play. Nichushkin still feels too cheap to me at 5,500. McKinnon is probably appropriately priced at 10.3. I mean, he has been regularly putting up 20 to 30 point DK points. So I don't think it's, I think it's probably appropriate. He's maybe a tad pricey, but not, I don't think 10.3 is unfair for him given what he's been doing. It's worth noting, obviously, that like it's pretty much impossible to play McKinnon, Rantanen, and Makar together. So you're playing 2 of those guys. Nichushkin is still too cheap, in my opinion, for 5,500, especially alongside McKinnon. If we go to range of outcomes here for, first of all, you can see McKinnon looks like very chalky player, but also has the best median and best ceiling on the slate. And if we go to the line range of outcomes, you've got Colorado as the second best median, pretty much tied with Nashville 1, very owned, and Colorado 2 is got a good median ceiling, but because they are also fairly pricey, neither team has a great 2x. So I think I kind of feel about Colorado the way I feel about Colorado every slate, which is if you like the value enough, if you can find like a good punt 2-man with a cheap D-man, like a Buffalo 2 that we already talked about, and it allows you to fit a Colorado 1, I don't have a problem with it because you're getting that meeting in your ceiling that really can win you the slate. What's difficult about it is that you're like, just because of the price of McKinnon, and if you want to try to fit in McCarr or Miko, you really have to get value. And so it hinges significantly on how much you like the value. Maybe that's not the right way to think about it, but that's kind of how I think about it, because the question becomes, are you better off going to like a slightly cheaper first line, like playing, if we're playing Vegas 1, they're 19-2 instead of 21-5 in a really good spot. But then you don't have to punt quite as much with your second line. So, it's kind of like the same concept. People are sick of hearing it, but oftentimes people will say, like, what do you think of this 1v1? I'm like, it's not a 1v1 because the players are priced so differently that it kind of depends on what the price savings allow you to get in the rest of your lineup. That being said, Mike, what do you think about Colorado 1? And are they a priority for you on this slate, given their price and given other teams that will be chalkier, but are, I don't think, debatably in better matchups? I think they are in probably better matchups than playing Utah.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado is getting healthy. They're getting Josh Manson back tonight. I mean, he's a defenseman, but he's a big part of their team. Definitely a punt D option at 2,500 tonight. I just read that he's coming back. But yeah, overall, they're getting healthy. They got Nichushkin, like you said. He's still underpriced. McKinnon's always in play. Like you said, the problem with them is McCarr has been really just like putting it in another gear recently. He's 8,500 on D, but I mean, he's barely a defenseman the way he plays. I mean, he's in the offense, on the power play. Utah takes a lot of penalties. They can get very undisciplined and parade to the box all game. If that happens against a team like Colorado, it could be lights out. And then, I mean, you've got Rantanen on line 2, so you really could, if you want, mix and match lines here. Play McKinnon, Nichushkin, Rantanen, but then you're not playing McCarr, right? Or you can play McKinnon, Nichushkin, McCarr, and then you're not playing Rantanen. So, like, if you can get all 4 of those guys in, have at it. But like that means you're playing like 2,600 players the rest of your lineup. So you're sacrificing everything else for this spot. That being said, Rantanen Colton is a 2-man. I don't love Middlestat. I don't know what his price is, but maybe because
it's 4,100. He's cheap, but not not a plug.
I mean, he's like a plug. Like he doesn't do that much. Yeah, he burned me because I played him and he's had 0 points in the last 2 games. Not even a shot.
I think we were all kind of excited to see him over there because he did really good stuff with Buffalo last year.
Yeah,
and so I think it was maybe a role, maybe just the role change, right? He's like much more of a supportive role in Colorado than he was in Buffalo.
Yeah. So I mean, to sum it up, I do like Colorado 1. I like Colorado 2. If I was to leave somebody off of 1, it would be Lekkinen, and on line 2 it would be Middlestat. So really, you could combine line 1 and 2.
And in terms of prioritizing, I think for me, like, I feel very similar to McKinnon as I do McDavid, and probably slightly less so, but similar to Kucherov, which is like if I'm playing them, I probably want one of the big dogs. So if I'm playing Colorado, like I'm probably trying to get to McKinnon. For what it's worth, the sheets sort of support it, and that his 2x is better than Rantanen and better than McCarr. And so I think I'm trying to get to McKinnon. And then the other thing that sticks out is kind of what I said, which is Val Nichushkin he's got a 54 2x and a 12% 3x. It's a kind of proof that he's underpriced. So if I'm playing Colorado, I'm probably playing McKinnon, Nichushkin, and then if I can figure out a way to make some of these other guys fit in, fine. But I'd probably be okay 2-manning them with those 2 guys as a way of getting a piece of them.
Yeah, Colorado's a good team. You can play, line 1 or 2. I'm all for it.
Yeah. I don't know what that noise is. Is that a question we got, or what was that noise?
No,
Did you hear
that's
that?
my Teams or my Microsoft Teams from something.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure, since I'm not the most tech savvy person, that if people are sending questions, we're not ignoring them. I am also occasionally checking the Discord. So if people are watching, feel free to post a question in the Discord as well, that we can get to. Moving on here to the next team total, we have New Jersey. They are actually look like they're in a really good game environment. They have a game pace that is second by a hair to Minnesota Dallas. They have a good team total, and they have an HDSF plus of 81.6, which is fairly strong. So sort of surprising because I don't consider Carolina to be a bad defensive team. If we go look at New Jersey in terms of how their market share has been broken up, you can see here that New Jersey 2 with Palat, Bratt, and Hughes, at least in the recent past, have been pretty strong, but pretty much the same projected goals between line and 1-2, and a bigger sample. Nason, Meyer, and Hischier have been plenty strong. So I think you're focused on line 1 and 2. There have been moments this year where you've played like they're cheapies, like Martinook. They've got a couple guys that are pretty cheap. Or maybe I'm thinking of Carolina, actually, who they're playing against. My bad. I was thinking about Carolina. So you're looking at line 1 and line 2. If we look at their correlation, we've got Hischier and Nason, and with Dougie Hamilton, and then you get Hughes and Bratt. Yeah, I mean, my reaction to this is just that I know that the game environment sheets don't necessarily support it because they make this look juicier than what I think it is, which maybe means it's sneaky, because usually what I think is kind of what the square player thinks. But these prices are kind of pricey for a matchup that I don't love at a lower team total. So I don't know that I could convince myself to play New Jersey on this slate when we have other teams at like price slightly better prices in better matchups. But let's before you chime in on New Jersey, Mike, let's see what the sheets think. The sheets really like New Jersey too. You can see that they've got a 54% 2x of all the pay-ups. If we sort this by salary, you can see they stick out here alongside Nashville 1 as kind of like the best 2x. So sheets definitely think they're an interesting contrarian pay up, because for sure, for all the reasons I just mentioned, other teams in good spots, the feeling that Carolina is not a great defensive matchup, and price, I don't think Palat, Brad, or Hughes will be very owned. So maybe that makes them a really nice contrarian pay up spot. I don't know that I'll get there in my little small field stuff, but I can't begrudge anybody who does, given how low owned I think they will be. But Mike, convince me that the sheets are right and that we should be taking New Jersey 2 more seriously than I am.
Yeah, I think we should. I want to caution you, and the fact that you're like so hesitant because Carolina's defensive, juggernaut makes me think that it's going to be a good low-owned spot even more. Carolina has been pretty leaky this year overall. They only have, they let up 5 to Nashville right before the break. They've let up, 4 to the Islanders, 4 to Seattle, 6 to Florida, 5 to the Blue Jackets, 4 to the Stars. So, just going to the game logs, you can see, they're losing games and the other team scoring 6-7 goals sometimes. New Jersey is starting to really click. And I know I saw on Twitter earlier, X, whatever we're calling it, their coach is like, I just hope that we can get back to that and that the break came at a bad time for them, because their 2 lines, and lines 1 and 2 are clicking great. So I really like New Jersey. I have trouble with line 1 just because if I'm going to play Jack Hughes, you almost have to play Bratt, at least in my mind, because they're just so connected to each other with the scoring. I think they called each other peanut butter and jelly a couple weeks ago. So, I mean, they're just like, in my head, like, all right, if I'm playing New Jersey 1, I got to play both those guys. So I'm playing both
By the way,
those
that
guys.
is like the most like Canadian white hockey player analogy I've ever heard in my life.
White bread, peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah. NFL duo would never. Anyway, keep
No,
going.
they'd give me fun of a little bit.
Jellies. Like, if it weren't hockey, I would make fun of them, but they're allowed because they're hockey players and they play with broken noses.
Yeah, so playing line 1 is tough, right? Because you got to spend a lot of your salary. So that's why line 2, and then the sheets. So it depends on what site you're on, but Daily Faceoff has the Heischer line as line 1. I think the sheets has it as line 2, correct?
Heischer, yeah. Okay. And Daily Faceoff has them as line 1, yeah, and then sheets have Hughes Bratt line 2, yeah.
Yeah, Nosen has been good this year. He's getting his opportunity on the power play too. Heischer is well priced. I got to look at Meyer's price again, but let's see, Meyer is 6,600, so he's accurately priced. Yeah, New Jersey line 2.
New Jersey is very sneaky here, and
yeah, I like them.
And to your point on Carolina's, and this is why it's good to kind of like admit the bias that you're coming at something with, because if you have a bias, the field probably has at least some component of the field probably has that bias. And to your point, if we go to Natural Stat Trick and look at expected goals for 60, New Jersey has the highest expected goals for every 60 minutes, expected goals against per 60. And this is free, by the way. You can go to Natural. This is like the fan graphs of hockey. It's Natural Stat Trick. Carolina is like around average. They're around three goals against per 60. From a high danger chance standpoint, also New Jersey's at the very top, and Carolina from a high danger chance against is actually a little worse than average. So yeah, like at best, I think we could say that Carolina is an average defensive team. We should certainly not be scared of them. And New Jersey has been a very, very, very strong, if not one of the strongest teams in the league offensively this year. So, yeah, I think to your point, it makes New Jersey a very sneaky spot. And, maybe the type of team you get in low digit percentage ownership as compared to a very chalky Vegas and probably like in a more obvious pay up spot like Colorado, just because you want McKinnon. So, that makes New Jersey a really nice GPP target with Hughes and Bratt, or if you want to use Hischier and Nason. To your point, Nason is 4,600, which isn't as cheap as you'd like for a guy who's not like a superpower, but he's had like a number of really good productive games. If you look at his game log over the last 4 or 5 games, he's had multiple games over 10 to 15. So yeah, I think we both agree. I mean, it makes them a kind of a sneaky spot. I don't know about Dougie Hamilton for 6,500. I mean, for that much money in my D-man, I kind of want a defender who's like really been very active, and he just hasn't been producing a whole lot to justify that price.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, if you're going to power play stack, if you're going to go Hughes, Heischer, then you start thinking Hamilton because you're already spending a good amount of your salary. And you can do that with New Jersey. You can double center it. But, yeah, I don't think I'm getting to Hamilton. I mean, he rates out fine tonight, but it's 6,500 for D. I don't think I'm doing it with him. It's a little too pricey. But, I mean, he could have 3-point game for sure, but I'm not going there either.
Cool. All right, Nashville's what we got next. We already know the sheets always love Nashville. To be fair, they got St. Louis tonight. And to be fair, they've also started to regress, and Tribe and others have pointed out before that regression. Sheets actually said it best recently. He said, when regression hits, it's violent, which is a way of saying that regression often, typically actually comes in an extreme form. It doesn't you don't slowly regress. And people have felt that Nashville is due to start exploding, and they've shown some signs of life right before the break. Their game pace isn't great. But their high danger chances and shots for matchup is pretty good because they're facing a St. Louis team that isn't very good. If we go and look at the way that they are broken down in terms of their production, we've got Nashville 1, that's kind of your main focus with Stammers, Marchessault, Forsberg. Nyquist is always too cheap. And then you got Ryan O'Reilly, who's on the first power play with them, as far as I remember. But it looks like the first line is probably your target. That being said, James, when he was on at the beginning, pointed out that Novak actually has like one of the best 2Xs, if not the best on the slate. Novak Evangelista have been really good in terms of a value line that we've all played at least a few times this year. If we now go and look at their correlation, you've got Forsberg, Marchessault, Stamkos, Josie's back. Before that, we were playing Brady Shea on the first power play for nothing, but Josie's back. I don't think you're playing Josie's first game back at 7,900, but you can if you want. Ryan O'Reilly's with them, or if not, you're going down to probably play a punt, Evangelista Novak line. I don't know that there's like really a whole lot of reason to play, Nyquist, Zach LaRue together. And if we go and look at the range of outcomes here, we already know from what we looked at that Nashville 1 looks very strong. They're the top of the sheets here, the best 2X, the best 3X. I don't know that I buy that they're going to be chalky. I really don't know that I buy that. Maybe Marchessault will be because he's still underpriced, and maybe that ownership is being driven by him. But I would venture to say that Vegas will be a lot more owned than Nashville, and maybe even Colorado 1 because people want to play McKinnon, and Nichushkin's too cheap. So it looks like you're probably focused on line 1. I do happen to like line 3 as well, and if we sort by 2X, 3X, is Nashville 3 on here? I guess not. It's probably just because they like Novak and not his partners. So what do you think, Mike, on Nashville 1 versus the rest of the lines, and are they a priority for you against the Blues?
I mean, I'm a little bit interested just because, the sheets really like them. The Sims really like them. I think the Sims like Colorado and Nashville like the most by far tonight. So at least I'm a little interested, but yeah, I don't know. I like Yossi is back. Yossi is one of the best defensemen in the league when he's healthy, and he can totally nuke a slate. He's one of those kind of D-men like Werenski and Makar and Yossi tonight that are justified at their price. But yeah, I mean, I'm just having trouble figuring out where I'd want to go with Nashville, and I don't think I'm going to get there because line 1's just expensive enough with Forsberg at 7,400, Marchessault at 5,800, Stamkos is playing center. I mean, he's only 5,700, but now you got Yossi back, and he's really the straw that stirs the drink on the power play, and he's 7,900 as well. So where are you fitting a 3 or 4 man with the value that you need from their top line? You can go to a punt line if you really want to punt Evangelista and Novak. You can do that, but you're not getting your value with your star with the top line or the second line. I wouldn't really go to. So yeah, Nashville's in a weird spot because they look like they're a good play tonight, but it's like, how do you play them? And I'm not finding a way to play them with a second stack I like. So yeah, I'm out of them now.
I think I might just, if I'm playing them, I might just 2-man Evangelista Novak because they both have really, really strong 2X and 3X. They're just, and you get a piece of them. Man, I want to play Marchessault and Stamkos, but like, if you're doing that, you're probably building towards a more balanced build, and then you're not paying up for your Colorado 1 or your Vegas 1 with Eichel or Nylander if you can figure out a way to fit him. So yeah, I'm with you. They're kind of in a tricky price range with Stamkos, Marchessault, and then Forsberg is just really expensive at 7,400. So maybe it's the coward's way out, but I'd be more inclined to kind of just get their Novak Evangelista piece as 2 really good value plays that allow me to kind of get my other pay up spots. All right. If we move on to Carolina here, and then what we'll do is we'll kind of run through the bottom half of these a little faster.
I got to jump at 3. So
yep. So we've got Carolina next. We already talked about their game pace being really good. They don't have a great HDSF plus. If we look at their market share percentage. Carolina's, we all know I've moaned and whined about how spread out they are, but it is backed up for what it's worth by the data. You can see like all their stuff is pretty spread out. I mean, line 3, for what it's worth, has with Martinook, who I mentioned before, they've actually gotten a lot of their high danger chances and they're really cheap. But it's a real mix. This is always the issue with Carolina 1, 2, and 3 is that you've got like a mishmash of who you're trying to figure out how to play them. So to me, they're never really going to be a strong priority unless they're priced in a way that makes them really attractive. Ghost is 4,800 as a D-man on power play 1. That makes them at least interesting. None of these other prices really stick out to me. I don't know. Is there any reason I'm glossing them over them too much? They just, given how spread out they are, I have a hard time playing them.
Yeah, I mean, Natchez has kind of, been the player that I like to play on Carolina, but he's got Kotkaniemi next to him at center, and I mean, if he was min price, yeah, maybe, but like 3,400 is a lot to pay for a guy that I don't really like playing. And then Svechnikov has not really taken off. So yeah, it's a lot like Nashville for me. It's like, who are you playing? I don't really want to go to Carolina 3. And Carolina is one of those teams that can score 4 goals and they could be 4 different lines.
And you get like 8 points total.
Yeah. So I'm just like, this isn't the slate to get cute and play Carolina in my eyes. And if they burn me, they burn me. But they're playing New Jersey. They're a solid team. They're on the road. No thanks for me. I don't even like any value D I'm not seeing anything I love in Carolina from top to bottom. So as much as I'm wearing a Whaler jersey and that's the team that they came from, I'm not playing them.
All right. Well, like I said, we'll go through these fast. Utah, Detroit, St. Louis. None of these game environments stick out as being particularly strong. Utah, at times we've liked to play them. I'll just focus on them for a minute. They have been cheap all year. You still have Gunther and Cooley they've been on a bit of a heater. Cooley has been productive. Keller's a really good player too. I mean, I think Utah's a good real life team. I think they're occasionally a good DFS team. Colorado has gotten into games mostly because of their goaltending not being too strong, where they've had some higher total games. So I don't think their price makes them a little more difficult. Cooley used to be like in the low 4s or upper 3s. Now he's up to 4,800. Gunther is still pretty cheap at 59. So that at least makes me consider them. But I don't know that they're a huge priority. If we look at just the way they've produced, they are pretty spread out between line 1 and line 2. Nothing really stands out here between line 1, line 2 in terms of how I prioritize them. Their price is similar as well. So I don't know. Are you attracted to line 1, line 2? I know you kind of like Utah as well in general.
Yeah, I like Utah. I mean, the coach benched Cooley in like one of the third periods of a game recently because of a bad play. So he's got young players. He's still trying to figure it out. There's talent on Utah. They're playing Colorado though. So Gunther's like he's the shooter on the power play. He's really talented and the scorer. But Keller can also just take over a game. But like, yeah, I'm having trouble getting to them. I guess if you really want to, you can go to line 3 with like Bukestad, Michelli, like 2-man or something. Yeah. Like
the sheets think that instead of playing, like if you're playing a 2-man cheap third line, the sheets really like Bug, Michelli just as much as they like Novak Evangelista, right?
Yeah. So I mean, if you want to, I mean, you're going to get single digit, like fraction digit ownership there, but you can do it. I mean, Michelli. Last year, he was shooting more than this year. He's not really doing that much this year, but I mean, he's 2,500, and Bukestad is a solid, two-way center, and he's 2,900.
But these guys are punts for a reason, right? Just be aware that their floor is literally like 2 points.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's it.
Yep. Detroit, St. Louis, Columbus. Detroit has what looks like the best high danger chances in shots matchup, but in a pace down spot. Columbus, we talked about liking Boston and Columbus getting into shootout games. I don't know that I can convince myself to really have any major interest in St. Louis, but let's look at their at their teams real quick in terms of correlation and how they're set up. Detroit has players that have been priced up. Kane is still pretty cheap at 4,600. He's had some really nice games. The rest of these guys don't really jump out in terms of pricing. Just to combine them, we talked about Columbus as well. Columbus has, Werenski's all the way up to 8,100. Marchenko is at 56. He's had some really nice games. Voronkov has been going off like fairly regularly, and he's still only 4,200. So that really sticks out to me in terms of price. And so you can do a Marchenko, Voronkov, and combine it with Monahan if you want as a 3-man. I don't think you're playing Werenski for 8,100. I just maybe I'm wrong, but that's extremely pricey for a D-man. And you could game stack it. I think you mentioned that earlier. I don't know. Do you have either for Columbus or for Detroit any major interest in any of these guys?
Not really. Detroit against Toronto. Toronto's been solid defensively. Columbus, I mean, the Bruins have been leaky, but like they're actually they play better defensively, and their goaltending is making more saves when it's Korpisalo in net. Swayman, I don't know what the deal is. Like they feel like they can hang him out to dry more because they think he's going to make saves, and he's not. I don't know what's going on with the Bruins, but when Korpisalo is in net, they seem to lock it down a little more, whether that's goaltending, defense, or just whatever. So Columbus, I don't really. I mean, I want to like line one, but I don't think I'm going to get there. If I was to play on line one, like you said, with Monahan, Voronkov, and Marchenko would be the way I went. Yeah, Werenski is great against a lesser team than Boston, but I don't want to pay that tonight.
Yeah. We'll just look at Minnesota, Chicago, and San Jose real quick, and then we'll call it. Minnesota has a really low total. I know they're missing Kaprizov tonight. They are correlated at least, and they move Boldy up to the first line. But I don't know. With that total in that matchup, doesn't really stick out to me as something I'm excited about in any way. And then we said, I know San Jose's got the lowest total. Who is the other team? Chicago, who you said would make me for a gross game stack with Buffalo. It is worth noting that Chicago is just really, really cheap outside of Bedard, right? You've got Bertuzzi, who's only 3,600, and then you've got the really hard thing about them is like there's like no correlation with Chicago outside of Bertuzzi and Bedard. It's like literally like every guy is not on the power play with the other guy. So that makes them a difficult play, and the fact that they're Chicago. And then San Jose has had their moments. They're actually like not a terrible offensive team. But geez, Celebrini all the way up to 7K. Graneland and Wenberg, or rather Toffoli, are a little more reasonable. Toffoli is only 4,400, which makes him at least interesting as a pretty cheap play who often produces from a fantasy standpoint. It's also the nice thing about them being the last game on the site, so you can celebrate the late hammer if they do something for you and you play them at low ownership. But I don't know. Any high priorities on these lowest team totals with Chicago or San Jose?
No, maybe Chicago. Just if you played Bedard with Bertuzzi, that's not the worst thing. For a 2-man stack, you're not paying a ton of money for it because Bertuzzi's cheap and he's performed well with Bedard when they played together. Seth Jones is back. If you wanted a 3-man with a defenseman and get the correlation for the power play, that's the way you would do it, at least in my eyes. But I wouldn't go, value shopping on Chicago. And San Jose, Wallman's out, and Celebrini's way too expensive, or not way too expensive, but he's priced correctly now. So yeah, I'm with you. Toffoli maybe as a one-off if you want to game stack that game. But other than that, I'm out on the Sharks unless you want to punt like Jan Ruda at 2,600 for D.
Yep. Well, Mike, I know you need to jump. I don't know if you want to stick around for my recap. I was just going to sort of give the high level for anyone tuning in at the very end as a summary. If you got to jump, that's all good. But if not,
I'll jump. But yeah, it was fun talking with you, and good luck, everybody.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the recap, and I'll take a look at the Sims to see if we're missing anything the Sims really like, is that it's a bit of an open slate. I mean, we talked about Vegas being in a really good spot. You can focus on Vegas 1, which is going to be the chalky, obvious pay up spot, but correlated, which makes them really nice. Vegas 2 is intriguing, but really mostly because of Tomas Hertl. We talked about Boston. Marchand and McAvoy are probably our favorites on that on that team. Pasta's always in play, but I don't know that he's had quite the outcomes that we expect, where you can kind of pay up for McKinnon or Nylander or Eichel, who have been more regularly getting there. Buffalo, we talked about being a priority with their second line being really cheap and a really nice value play. I don't know that we have a ton of interest in line one. Colorado, we talked about with McKinnon, being McKinnon and essentially Colorado is always in play because of their upside and their ceiling, but you're just going to really have to like the value. But we did really like some of the value, and there's good punt value in the form of the Nashville 3, as well as one of the other teams that we just talked about with their third line that I'll get to in a minute when I remember them. Toronto is interesting because Matthews is out, but they're kind of hard to figure out who you're going to play. They won't be zoned, which makes them interesting, but I don't know that they're a huge priority outside of Nylander. Dallas, we talked about being difficult because you have to choose between line 1, line 2, line 3. I don't know that Mike nor I have a really strong preference on who you play there, but the nice thing about Dallas is that you do get them at probably very low ownership because nobody knows how to play them. Utah's difficult, not a huge priority. That was the other third line we talked about. We talked about Michelli with Bukestad being really nice value if you don't want to play somebody like Novak Evangelista as punts. Columbus is okay with Marchenko and Voronikov, pretty cheap. New Jersey, we talked about being a really nice contrarian pay-up spot. The Sheets sort of most loved play, I would say, based on our review today, is New Jersey with Hughes, because they're not going to be quite as owned. Carolina is maybe overestimated in terms of their defensive prowess, and New Jersey projects really well with Hughes and his lines mates. So it's something that's definitely worth considering in GPPs because you're going to get them at such low ownership. Nashville, one, looks really, really strong. You just sort of have to trust that they're going to get there at some point with Stamkos, Forsberg, and Marchessault. But again, because of their pricing, you're playing them instead of other teams that have been getting there more regularly and are also in really good game environments. And then other than that, none of these other lower teams stuck out a ton to us. If we look at the Sims, and I'm just going to rerun this real quick just to make sure that it is updated for more recent projections. Let me refresh here. Let's just double check to see if there's anything that the Sims are really loving that we maybe missed. Should be here in a second. I think it's running. We're running one more time. We have, here we go. So if we look at this by position, the Sims really like McKinnon, and they really like Stamkos. They really like Nashville in general. They say if you're not playing Stamkos, you should at least consider Ryan O'Reilly or Tommy Novak as a punt. But really what sticks out here is McKinnon and Stamkos being priority plays, which I don't think is a surprise given kind of how low owned Nashville 1 will be relative to those other pay-ups. And then I don't think McKinnon will be super duper chalky, but he'll be more chalky. But the Sims think he's a priority pay up. At wing, the Sims again love Nashville 1. So I would say that the Sheets and the Sims really think we should be considering Nashville 1 instead of one of the other teams as pay ups today. But they also like Val Nichushkin, so you can play McKinnon and Nichushkin together. And then from a defensive standpoint, you've got Makar and then a bunch of cheaper guys, including Harley that we talked about, and then some punts. In terms of team exposure, again, we can see Nashville being a priority in Colorado, and then it's a big mix of other teams. So I think basically the Sheets think we should pay up for Colorado's upside or pay up for Nashville, who's a little cheaper but will be a lot less owned. And then we didn't really look at goalie, but takeaway from goalie is usually if you can pair it with one of your forward lines, but don't overthink goalie because it's pretty random. So hopefully that was helpful for folks. I think it's a pretty wide open slate. I'm going to hop on here to the Discord and see if anybody who is watching has any questions before we jump off. And if not, we will be around in the Discord before lock in a few hours answering questions. Let's see if anybody has any final questions. I do not see any. So with that, we will call it and hope everybody does well. I know it's a pretty wide open slate, but I think there's some pretty obvious pay up spots and some pretty easy way to correlate today. The initial thing we talked about also was the fact that the sims like 4-man stacks if you can get to them. So think about how maybe you can 4-man Colorado, maybe Nashville, Contrarian New Jersey. And then if you like chalky Vegas, consider it, but just be aware they're chalky and that the sheets don't love them so much. So with that said, hopefully this was helpful. We'll be back on soon and appreciate everyone tuning in and good luck.